Hi everyone, today I want to talk about how you are not an antinatalist if you are against abortion. And as always, this is just my personal opinion, so let's begin. I've come across people, and curiously they've all been men, that call themselves antinatalists, but are opposed to abortion for mainly the same reasons as every anti-choicer. That abortion is a crime, that fetuses feel pain, that they have the right to life, blah blah blah. Apparently these people don't understand intent, consent, or reproductive rights, or they simply think that these don't apply to women. But regardless of the reasons or excuses you might give to be against abortion, I don't see how you can be anti-birth and pro-forced birth at the same time, since that is a contradiction. For those of you who don't know, antinatalism is a philosophical position that assigns a negative value to birth and therefore is against the reproduction of new human beings. Antinatalists argue that people should abstain from procreating because they consider it to be morally incorrect. This doesn't say that antinatalism assigns a negative value to conception and that people should abstain from conceiving because it is morally incorrect. I haven't found anything that states this or anything similar, but if I am the one that is wrong, I ask that you please correct me. In my last Spanish video, Why I Am an Antinatalist, I said that maybe there are antinatalists that are against abortion, and I said this because I obviously had not thought it through and I believed it could be possible for this reason. Since I was 8 years old, I knew I didn't want to reproduce, and I also thought that nobody else should do it either. So when I discovered antinatalism, I erroneously thought, oh, I guess I've been an antinatalist since I was 8 years old. And I know I've said this on several occasions. But after listening to the video I'm going to mention in a minute, I realized that from age 8 to 25, since religion had me believing I had to be against abortion, I was therefore only in favor of prevention. And not until I changed my position on abortion is when I could have called myself an antinatalist. And I want to apologize for not realizing this sooner and for causing any confusion because that was not my intention. My point is that since all this time I've been in agreement with part of this philosophy, I ignorantly assumed it was enough for me to call myself an antinatalist, and I thought that the same could apply to others, but I was obviously incorrect. So perhaps the people that are only in favor of prevention and against conception and abortion, maybe they should call themselves pro-preventionists or anti-conception, anti-abortionists or something else that more accurately describes their stance. I do want to say that I am grateful for the video I mentioned because it helped me recognize my mistake, and I understand there might be others that have not made the connection and have been calling themselves antinatalists when they are actually not. So this is one of the reasons why I'm making this video. I know there are many people that hate life or their life, that hate humanity or children, that are against sex, romantic relationships, the conception of new human beings, or that promote a celibate or child-free life. And even though an antinatalist can be or feel all of these things, I think it's important to point out that none of them make you an antinatalist. For me, antinatalists are those that are in favor of prevention, but that understand that contraception is not 100% effective, and that people are not going to stop having sex, and that you can't sterilize the whole population. So they don't consider conception to be immoral or wrong, but they do birth. Since they know that a pregnancy can occur because of rape or other reasons, and it's impossible to have total control over this. But it is possible to have control over the birth when you have access to legal abortions. So this is where the moral aspect of it lies, since now you have the choice to allow the fetus to be born or not. And I assume that most antinatalists know that abortion is a right and not a crime. Or if someone thinks that abortion is wrong, they understand that it is even worse for a fetus to be born, so they decide to support what they consider to be the lesser evil. But if you think that conception and abortion are immoral and wrong, then I think your beliefs are not in total alignment with this philosophy. I personally am in favor of abortion without restrictions or time limit because I understand that nobody has the right to use the body of another without their consent. So under any circumstance, it is a crime and torture to force a girl or a woman to remain pregnant and give birth against her will. and also because I am against procreation and abortion is a tool to prevent new births. Some of the reasons why I am an antinatalist is because I don't have the right to bring a child into this world since I can't ask for his consent, and because I don't want to bring others into this world to suffer, nor do I want them to be the cause of unnecessary suffering for others, and also because I give negative value to human life and I don't see the need for its perpetuation. So I believe that it is better to be aborted than to be born. I am going to share a couple chats I had, and I am going to focus mostly on the antinatalist aspect of it. And what I say is not exclusively directed to them too, but to anyone who has these beliefs. The first one is a YouTuber, Roberto63526, who calls himself an antinatalist, and he said in one of his videos that he is against abortion. I don't know what his position is exactly, and I was going to leave the link to the video, even though it's in Spanish, but it seems like he took it down or now has it private. So I apologize that I no longer have access to it, and I will shorten the comments just to save time. In case there is anyone who doesn't know this, in Spanish the word natalicio literally means birth, which I assume is where natalismo comes from, which is natalism in English. So my comment to him was, hearing you say you're against abortion, I realize that perhaps someone that thinks like you cannot call himself an antinatalist because the word says it very clearly, against birth. And you are only against conception but not against birth. Because if you want those fetuses to be born once they have been conceived, then how can you call yourself an antinatalist? He replied, I am convinced, together with Julio Cabrera, that a being that has been conceived is already born, because he has already been generated in his mother's womb. That being is no longer a non-being. There are many branches of antinatalism because language and its definitions will have different meanings. For some, being born does not happen in the moment of birth, but before in time. I replied, I don't agree with the idea that to be conceived means to be born. Just like I can't say that the one who just enrolled in college can now be called a graduate. There is a process from the moment he starts school to the moment he finishes, and the beginning cannot be called the same as the end. He didn't reply, so this was the end of the conversation. First, if you say that in the moment of conception, that because that being already exists, you are then going to say he is born, I am going to tell you that neither to be conceived nor to exist is the same as to be born. Just because something exists is not reason enough for you to call it what it can become, but that it clearly isn't yet. And also, the beginning of a stage or cycle cannot have the same exact name as the beginning of the following stage or cycle. Just like a couple that just got engaged is not a marriage, an egg that just got fertilized is not a born person. But even if you want to believe that being conceived is the same as being born, that still doesn't mean this gives you any right whatsoever to force a woman to give birth. Second, you say that there are many branches of antinatalism and that for some, birth happens before in time. The definition of conception is fertilization, the beginning of pregnancy. The definition of birth is the act or instance of being born. The time of the human birth is defined as the time at which the fetus comes out of the woman's womb into the world. It implies the end of the gestation. This does not say that birth is also the act or instance of being conceived. And the definition of antinatalism is also very clear, against birth, which means to me that abortion is included. The fact that there are exceptions or that people come to antinatalism for different reasons does not mean that it has different branches. Nor does it mean that because of this, people can modify or distort it, just so that it reflects their own personal beliefs. So the second guy left me a comment on my Spanish video saying, "What a shame that being an antinatalist, you are in favor of abortion. Abortion only in cases of sexual abuse or rape." So I answered, I am in favor of abortion precisely because I am an antinatalist. If not, I would be inconsistent. So I made this to explain my point because this is the way I see it. Here is prevention, the conceived and the born. And neither the conceived nor the aborted are called born. Even though sometimes we use the word birth to describe the beginning of something, when it comes to human life, the words conception and birth cannot be used as synonyms because they are not. I think that those that call themselves antinatalist but are in favor of forced births, it looks like their moral line starts here and then it jumps all the way over here to this area. And those of us that are against birth, our moral line is just this one. So for the anti-conception, anti-abortion person, it seems like this is acceptable, but these three are not. And for the antinatalist, anything up to here is acceptable, but these are not. And I believe that being in favor of forced births is even more immoral than voluntary ones, because not only are you imposing your will on the fetus, but also on the woman, and you are violating her bodily autonomy, forcing her to do what you supposedly claim to be against. And lastly, for someone to say that this line is actually this line over here, just so they can call themselves something that they're not, I find it intellectually dishonest. And if you believe that one of the principles of antinatalism is to prevent unnecessary suffering, but you are in favor of forced births, you are then causing great suffering to the woman, possibly her family, and to the fetus once it's born because he is unwanted. And especially if he is abandoned or abused, or if his mother dies because she was forced to give birth, or if he is born with disabilities, physical deformities, chronic or degenerative diseases, etc., or if he ends up living a life that he considers painful or undesirable, which only proves that those who don't know their place are usually the ones who end up causing the most amount of harm. It is not your place to govern a woman's body. And by being against abortion, you are causing equal or more suffering than what you supposedly say you are against. All because you are giving yourself rights that don't belong to you. And if you believe that you should not bring a child into this world without his consent, I would like to know what consent have fetuses given you for you to force them to be born? And what consent exactly have women given you over their body for you to force them to give birth? For me, being against abortion is one of the most irresponsible, immoral, and sadistic positions one can have. And it amazes me that many people that consider themselves woke or evolved still hold it and defend it. Perhaps some believe they are free thinkers, but when it comes to abortion, they're still holding on to the erroneous and antiquated idea that our reproductive system belongs to them. So they see and treat us like part of their property. That's why these people talk about fetuses as if fetuses grew on fucking trees. As if the woman was not even part of the equation and had no say over what is inside her own body. These people think that women are just objects that fetuses have the right to use and they to control willy-fucking-nilly. And unfortunately, there are still many that due to their ignorance, stupidity, indoctrination, or schizophrenia are still calling their misogyny morality. Like I've said before, it is equally immoral to take a life that you don't have the right to take as it is to try to save a life that you don't have the right to save. In closing, if I say that I am against birth because I give negative value to the perpetuation of human existence, that it is wrong to reproduce because we can't ask for consent, that I am against unnecessary pain, suffering, and torture, but at the same time I want all or most pregnancies to culminate in birth, even if it has to be done by force. And I am therefore deliberately being the cause of immense suffering for others. I think that besides being completely contradictory, it would be very obvious that I am neither an ethical person nor an antinatalist. Okay, everyone, that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. Talk to you soon. Bye.